This picks up off the last podcast about thinking for yourself. If you want to start a revolution, start by thinking for yourself. Thinking for yourself is the revolution. We talk about these world religions, and what rarely gets discussed is why people leave a religion that they were raised by. And generally, we abandon things that injured us in some way, that harmed us. So within the Christian faith, being raised Catholic, seeing myself as a sinner, that was not a healthy psychology to have. The mentality that I was imperfect and that I should feel guilty or shame for my faults and mistakes and my quote-unquote sins caused me to want to prevent this pain, shame, and guilt by evolving out of that religion that made me feel that way. So when people get heated about discussions about religion, oftentimes they'll talk about all the destruction that religions have done on a mass scale as far as converting people violently and or justifying war and murder. What's not discussed is why people leave a religion. You would assume, or if you question people, they would likely explain to you that that religion violated them in some way or harmed them, that that religion imposed upon them a mentality that pressured them to see themselves in a certain way that was negative. So I know I evolved out of a religion that made me feel shame and guilt. Then we can have a rational discussion as to why people are quote-unquote infidels and why they abandon the religion of their childhood. And if you're a proponent of one of the 5 organized religions, well then demonstrate that by following the rules and actually behaving in the ways in which your religion dictates you ought to. Oftentimes Christianity, for example, gets oversimplified by Jesus being portrayed as meek and cheek-turning, when really he was a badass who challenged authority. He challenged the leaders of his day. He was a revolutionary. He was a radical nonconformist, and he challenged all of the hypocrisy that he saw in the leaders of that religion. So all through society, we have leaders and authority figures that dictate how the followers should live, and yet they don't live that way themselves. Every religion is against the accumulation of wealth, and yet so many people who claim to be an adherent of a religion spend most of their days pursuing wealth, status, and power, and working towards their public identity, working towards a view of them that's favorable in society. And that's not how free-thinking spiritual leaders lived themselves. What I think the Spirit, the Supreme Being, wants of us is not to relinquish our brains and follow, but to exercise our brains and be our own leaders. And not then go seek followers, but to simply carve our own way based on our own personalities and characters, given our situation. In your own ideology, you can allow for faults and flaws and wrongdoings and mistakes and pain that you cause other people. You can allow for that because you're not imposing upon yourself perfection. You are accepting that you're imperfect and that you will make these mistakes. So then why would you try to generate a following if you know you're not perfect and that you won't always follow your own rules and teachings?